Excusez-moi, Madame la greffière, j'entends une
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, but I can hear a voice in the
order. Welcome to meeting number 37 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. Conformément à la
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083F, the committee is meeting to hear from witnesses as part of its study entitled Federal Support for French Language or Bilingual Post-Secondary Institutions in a Minority Situation.
députés, les témoins peuvent s'exprimer.
Members of Parliament and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation is available.
Je vous rappelle que toutes les observations
All comments from witnesses and MPs alike must go through the chair. If you have a technical issue, do not hesitate to let me know or let the clerk know.
to all participants and attendees that you cannot take photos or screen captures. Voilà donc le moment de souhaiter la bienvenue.
And now it is time to welcome our witnesses as part of this study. For the first hour, as an individual, we have Stéphanie Chouinard, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science at the Royal Military College of Canada and Department of Political Studies at Queen's University. Also appearing as an individual, Mr. Frédéric Lacroix, essayist. And from Laurentian University, we have Robert Haché, President and Vice Chancellor, accompanied by Marie-Josée Berger. Berger, I hope I pronounced that correctly. If not, please let me know. She is Provost and Vice President.
Nous allons commencer avec
We will begin with Ms. Chouinard. Witnesses will each have 5 minutes for their opening speech. And as you know, Ms. Chouinard, I have little cards to indicate when you have 1 minute left or when your time is up. So, Madam Chouinard, you have the floor for the next 5 minutes. You may activate your microphone. We are ready to hear from you. Thank you very much, Chair Dubourg. And thank you to the committee for inviting me. I would like to say hello to Vice Chairs Blaney and Beaulieu. Thank you for taking the time to invite us to discuss this issue of crucial importance to the vitality of OLMCs and all of Canadian Francophonie. This issue is access to post-secondary education in the minority language. In 1982, recognizing the fundamental role of schools and the survival of minority communities, the Canadian government saw fit to enshrine in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms a right to access to education in the official language of one's choice from kindergarten to grade 12 for rights holders. In 2021, it is clear that our society has changed and that these rights are now insufficient to meet the needs of our communities. In particular, the qualifications expected in the labor market have changed over the past 40 years, with employers expecting their employees to have a higher level of education than in the past. Higher levels of education are required to remain in the middle class. As a result, more Canadians are attending post-secondary institutions today than when the Charter was adopted. In 1981, the proportion of the Canadian population aged 15 and over with a post-secondary degree or diploma was 37%. Today, that proportion has almost doubled to 65%. These trends, which show no signs of slowing, have led minority language communities to ask their respective provinces to create, or in some cases, protect, post-secondary institutions in their language. In other words, the needs of official language minorities now go beyond the scope of Section 23 in both directions: early childhood education, which I could also discuss today, and post-secondary education. In sociological terms, the goal of these minorities is to achieve institutional completeness in education, where members of these communities would be guaranteed a full range of education in their language, regardless of the path they choose to enter the labor market. What is the effect when this post-secondary education is not available close to home? And here by close, I mean about 80 kilometers from the parental home. A few studies by the late Office of the French Language Services Commissioner provide some answers. On the one hand, we see students in minority schools gradually leaving the school system for majority schools, and in increasing numbers from grade 8 onward. The reason is simple. Students feel the need to prepare to perform in English at the next stage of their education, and therefore they switch to English language instruction preemptively. The lack of access to post-secondary education in the minority language in a given region, therefore, has impacts on the school system as such. This decision also has major impacts on the vitality of communities because the age of young adulthood is a time in an individual's life where the identity crystallizes. A young person who leaves the institutions of their community at that point in life will identify less with their community as an adult. An individual who pursues their secondary education in the majority language is also more likely to work in the majority language and to end up in an exogamous family, which, as we know, are major vectors of intergenerational language transfer. In short, we have known for a long time that education is the lifeline of our communities. But our definition of education must now go beyond what is prescribed by the Constitution to meet needs of our communities. It is precisely because post-secondary institutions are not constitutionally protected that they are so fragile. And the last few years have clearly shown us that. Either because of insufficient investments over a number of years, as was the case with Saint-Jean campus and less dramatically at the University of Moncton or Université Sainte-Anne, or because the French language programs got the axe to salvage the situation, as was the case at Laurentian University, post-secondary education in Canada's Francophonie is currently in crisis. The collapse of an institution like Laurentian exposes the weakness of bilingual institutions. These institutions struggle to think and act for the needs of the minority community within. As we realized years ago with elementary and secondary schools, it is the minority that almost always pays the price for the bilingual model of education. It is time to move to autonomy, which has already been learned, practiced, and refined in K-12. There's no doubt in my mind that the federal government has a role to play in this area, a role that it has already partially assumed through special transfers to Francophone and bilingual institutions. But we must ensure that increased federal responsibility does not lead to a loss of responsibility on part of the provinces. And I will close on that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Chouinard. I will now give the floor to Mr. Frédéric Lacroix for the next 5 minutes.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy to speak after Ms. Chouinard because I'm also very interested in the concept of institutional completeness in my studies and research. I have written a book called Why Bill 101 is a Failure, published by Boréal in 2020. In my book, I analyze the situation of public and parapublic Anglophone and Francophone institutional networks in Quebec. And in my analysis, I use this concept of institutional completeness, which is, in my opinion, a crucial concept. It's important for analyzing the equity of funding for Francophone institutions in minority settings and even in majority settings, as in Quebec. This notion of institutional completeness originated in the work of Canadian sociologist Raymond Breton, a Francophone from Saskatchewan, in 1964. He spoke about the range of institutional services offered, saying that it has a direct impact on a group's linguistic vitality and ability to perpetuate itself in space and in time. In Quebec, like elsewhere in Canada, there are two major language groups sharing the same territory, and they each have their own institutional networks. But when one group has a more extended, more solid institutional network, it will manage to attract members of the weaker group into its network, such that the weaker group will suffer from institutional incompleteness. This notion of institutional completeness was first mobilized before a court in the Montfort Hospital case in Ontario. And my colleague, Professor Chouinard, has also analyzed the legal use of this notion. Essentially, it has to do with minority and majority groups. In my opinion, the main problem with the Official Language Act is the artificial concept of the double majority. The Act establishes an English-speaking majority outside Quebec and a French-speaking majority in Quebec. Each majority has an associated minority, francophones outside Quebec and anglophones in Quebec. However, this concept of double majority has no reality, sociologically speaking, which is evident from the fact that Quebec anglophones, who are a minority, numerically speaking, actually assimilate about half of the allophone immigrants who settle in Quebec. Anglophones, in terms of mother tongue, make up just 8% of the population of Quebec, but assimilate half of allophone immigrants who settle in Quebec. Quebec's anglophones, in reality, have the linguistic vitality of a majority. The Official Languages Act enshrines a competitive and unequal bilingualism between English and French throughout Canada, including in Quebec. Since 2001, the relative weight of francophones has been declining rapidly in Quebec, while the relative weight of anglophones has been maintained or even increased. Language dynamics are not governed by provincial borders, but by the borders of the country, by Canadian borders. This means that there is only one true majority in Canada, and that is English. Canada is an English-speaking majority country. In my opinion, the concept of a double majority, which forms the basis of the Official Languages Act, well, it is false and misleading. The Official Languages Act should be based on recognition of this reality. It should be asymmetrical. I've applied this notion to study university funding in Quebec. I did some calculations. There are 3 English language universities in Quebec, McGill, Concordia, and Bishops, and they bring in 30% of total revenues in Quebec. And this is 3.7 times higher than the demographic weight of English speakers in Quebec, so these English language universities are in a situation of institutional over-completeness. In contrast, French language universities in Quebec are underfunded relative to the demographic weight of francophones. They receive 70% of total revenues, even though francophones make up 78% of Quebec's population. This places a direct burden on the linguistic vitality of the francophone group in Quebec. Another interesting point is that federal research funds are massively channeled towards Quebec's 3 English language universities, which receive 38.4% of federal funding. McGill alone receives 1/3 of federal funding in Quebec. Am I out of time? All right. So the rest of my remarks are in my speaking notes and my documents. Thank you. Mr. Chair, you are on mute. Thank you. Mr. Lacroix, you're right. You have run out of time. But I will take this occasion to remind our witnesses that they can send documents directly to our clerk. This is helpful to us in the study we are currently conducting. Now, we will hear from Mr. Robert Haché. Mr. Haché, you have 5 minutes for your speech. And Mr. Haché is accompanied by Miss Marie-Josée Berger. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to speak to you today. I am in Laurentian University in the northeast of Ontario. I am speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people on 1850 treaty territory. First, thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. Thank you also for the important work that you are doing here in order to honor the experience of francophones in language minority settings everywhere in Canada. I have lived and worked in many places in Canada in both official languages, so I experienced firsthand the impact that the federal government and that your committee have had for decades now huge impact in protecting official language minority communities and in protecting and promoting bilingualism in Canada. Laurentian University is the biggest bilingual university in northeastern Ontario, and it has a truly bilingual and bicultural mandate. It offers English language and French language programs, as well as Indigenous learning and teaching. Our university serves students from the north and from northern Ontario and has for many decades now. In fact, Laurentian was the birthplace of the Franco-Ontarian Renaissance. Many symbols and institutions of Francophone Ontario were conceived and created here. And we were the first bilingual university in Canada to be governed by the French Language Services Act. We want Laurentian University to be a place where English and French language programs thrive and are appreciated. We want to be a strong bilingual institution, and we want to create the next generation of thriving leaders in social studies, research and development, public administration, education, the arts, community development.
The university faced an impossible choice: close the university's doors or set down the path of the company's Creditors Arrangement Act to ensure the university's survival. We recognize that this would be difficult and that our community would be impacted. The CCA process is allowing us to restructure our academic and operational affairs in a way that will be financially viable for the university's long-term future. It is difficult. It is still painful for our community. We've had to say goodbye to talented and committed faculty, staff, and researchers, many of whom worked right up to the end of the semester to help our students succeed. Laurentian has revised its academic program offerings to focus on student interests, academic strengths, and desirable outcomes for the students. Laurentian continues to offer 28 consolidated undergraduate programs and 5 graduate programs in French, which have strong enrollments, meeting the needs of our students. In all, given the focus on maintaining in-demand programming, fewer than 10% of all students enrolled in French language programs are being directly affected by these changes. These offerings keep us amongst the most comprehensive institutions with respect to our balance of French and English language programs. Further, our Francophone students continue to have a variety of French language courses to choose from in their programs. Lastly, I want to underscore that enrollment in our French language programs has been increasing over time. This matters greatly. Contrary to the general trend in Northern Ontario's declining population base, strong French language program enrollment is a sign that Laurentian's Francophone students and their communities remain engaged in what La Laurentienne has to offer. We look forward to serving Francophone communities in the North, across Ontario, Canada, and beyond for many years to come. Merci, miigwech. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Haché.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haché. We will now begin questions and answers, the first round. Our first question will be from the Vice Chair, Mr. Blaney. And I would remind all committee members to address their question to whoever they would like to answer the question. Go ahead, Mr. Blaney. Thank you very much, Chair. I have a question for Mr. Haché, but first, I'd like to make 2 comments. First, I thank the witnesses for joining us this afternoon. We welcome you with open arms to assist us in this study and to help us study the decline of the French language in Canada. Ms. Chouinard, thank you for speaking to us about the increasingly important role of universities in Quebec, as well as for speaking to us about Quebec and official language minority communities. And Mr. Lacroix, you are a very prolific author, and I want to quote you. You said that Ottawa should fully support French language institutions in Canada because French is the only official language which is declining. True equality, substantive equality between English and French, not just legal equality, would require asymmetric principles. And you said about post-secondary institutions that a bilingual post-secondary institution is such that when we overinvest in majority institutions, minority groups suffer. Now, Mr. Haché, your university, Laurentian, is going through a major crisis, and we really deplore what's happening. It is so sad. It is so unfortunate that such a great university should be in this situation that it is now. You are such a strong bilingual university. We have heard witnesses previously during this study. We heard, for example, from the Francophone Ontario Association, and we have heard that the Francophone community thinks your university is no longer able to be the beacon of the French community in Northern Ontario because of all the issues going on. You have collaboration, partnership agreements with 3 satellite campuses. But here's my question for you. Would you be willing to transfer your French language programs to other entities like Centre Doré? So these would be institutions run by and for people, Francophones in Northern Ontario. Answer. Thank you very much for your question. I understand where you're coming from. And yes, we do have work to do to rebuild trust and re-earn the confidence and trust of the community. We are deploying all our efforts and energy for our Francophone students and our Francophone programs, which are a cornerstone of Laurentian's operations. At Laurentian, we will continue to offer French language programs for the future of the community in Northern Ontario. Question. Yes, but the French language programs which were offered this year, will they be offered next year in September at Laurentian? Yes. Answer. Yes. These programs will be offered in the fall and in the future, hopefully. Question. Today, the minister said that she would be willing to put forth additional funding. I'd like to come back to the question I asked about when it comes to the University of Sudbury. How do you see the relationship between your university and Sudbury? And if you want to be a leader, why did you cease your partnerships with these 3 institutions which offer Francophone French language programs? So how can you regain and rebuild trust? Because as you know, sir, the association spoke to us about Laurentian University and saying that the relationship is totally undermined at this point. Answer. Thank you for the question. The financial situation of the university is something. It has been, in fact, declining for many years. There have been many problems and challenges along the way. And we reached a point where our financial situation was no longer tenable. So we really reached a turning point, and we absolutely had to make major changes in order to be able to continue to operate.
In our review, we focused on programs that had a lot of student interest associated with them, and that focus is making it possible for us to move forward. We do need to highlight that the programs that were shut down had no more than 2 or 3 students a year in a program. That level is not sustainable either financially or academically. Having so few students in a program, and this is in spite of efforts we'd made over many years to attract students. As I said earlier, the Francophone student population at Laurentian has increased in recent years. So the programs that are being maintained are programs that do have students, and we will continue to support them. Your general situation, speaking of Francophone programs, how do you envisage September on? Well, we're very optimistic about September. The students are continuing to apply to the university, and we're going to continue supporting them and hoping to get them back on campus. Thank you, Mr. Haché. Mr. Blaney, that is all the time you have. Mr. Lefebvre now has the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to Mr. Haché, but I have one for Ms. Chouinard as well at the end. Mr. Haché, cuts to the French language programs have cut out the soul of Laurentian University. There are a couple of things that I would need to say. We have been having discussions and conversations over the past year. I know that we've spoken about heritage and renovations at the university. Yes, and those are being carried out as part of the program, federal program that supports these renovations. On December 22nd, you called a meeting with myself and Mr. Serret to talk about the situation at Laurentian. That was the first you told us about the financial difficulties. I said that the federal government could provide support for official languages programs. Is that not true? Did I also not say that I had communicated with Minister Joly's office to see what we could do? Because as you know, and as we said last Tuesday, the official languages program works through a federal transfer payment, but it does get delivered by the province. So we can work together to move this forward. Did I not say that? Yes, that's what I recollect. I also told you about the Aboriginal Indigenous Languages program that the federal government had put forward, and that Laurentian University had not applied, at least not the first component. You were to follow up with Canadian Heritage. Is that not true? Yes, it is. So on one hand, Laurentian Universities has an engagement with the province and works with the federal government. Minister Joly's office has made a commitment, as has the provincial government, to move forward with those discussions. Last week, you told another committee, Mr. Haché, that with respect to Laurentian's funding, you have deductions from the province. So here is a very simple question that I'd like to put to you. It seems that some members don't understand the difference between certain levels of government. What government is responsible for post-secondary education, municipal, provincial, or federal government? It is the provincial government. Right. And this is why you're negotiating with the province, right? Because that is who you should be talking to. Right. On April 29th, 2020, Laurentian University issued a press release called Challenges for Laurentian linked to COVID-19. You stated the university is trying to compensate for a shortfall for 2020 that is the result of frozen tuition fees for students and reductions in provincial funding. Is that true? There were a number of factors that collectively caused the university financial problems, including those that are set forth in that sheet. Was it cuts from the federal government? It was cuts from the provincial government. Thank you. I'd also like to talk to you about this. Is the federal government providing direct funding for your university's operations? We do have some federal contributions on bilingualism, French language programming, and for Indigenous programming. We have a percentage of the funding. That's not very high, but some of our funding does come from the federal government. But it comes through the province, doesn't it? You don't apply directly to the federal government. Is that not so? Yes, that is correct. What is Laurentian's overall budget? About 150 million. And what share is represented by the federal government support for official languages? I can't give you an exact figure. Well, perhaps you could come back with that figure, Mr. Haché. It is a fraction of it, yes, but I could. I just want to ensure that this is correct. federal funding to Laurentian does go through the province for your operations, correct? Correct. Mr. Haché, last week my colleague suggested that the federal government could lend $10 million to Laurentian University, and that would have made it possible for Laurentian to avoid the CCCA process. Is that indeed the case? No. Ms. Chouinard, I have a question for you. Some parties are suggesting that the federal government should compensate for the cuts the Conservative government made to Laurentian University. I'm going to make some work for you. I'd like you to indicate in writing what the socioeconomic and sociopolitical impact will be if the federal government keeps compensating for provincial cuts. Money is the core necessity for what you're trying to do, and I would like that answer in writing. Ms. Chouinard, I'm so sorry, but that is all the time Mr. Lefebvre has. Mr. Beaulieu, 10 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our three panelists. My question is to Mr. Lacroix. I've read his book as well. And in that book on federal research funding, he said that English language universities have 38.4% of overall university funding, and that is 5 times the demographic weight of Anglophones in Quebec. He didn't have an opportunity to complete his statement, so I'd like to see whether he'd like this opportunity to complete it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Federal funding sent to Quebec represent a significant component of universities' budget. This is about $900 million a year. That's a lot of money. So the federal government is investing disproportionately in English language universities in Quebec. The federal government is investing these funds to anglicize program offerings in the universities. The funding is used to set up English language programs in French language universities. I believe that the original purpose of these funds has been circumvented and that the funds are being used to anglicize French language university. The federal government is also investing a great deal in the healthcare system to anglicize service offerings. For example, between 2008 and 2013, McGill received $32 million to train healthcare workers, and this, in fact, is in contempt of the French language charter, which guarantees the right to work in French in Quebec. I've also been studying the issue of universities, bilingual or francophone universities outside Quebec, and that through institutional completeness lens. The French language portion of bilingual universities account for only 3% of university revenue, and the number of francophones in Ontario with French as a mother tongue is 4.5%. So French language universities in Ontario are chronically underfunded, as they are in Alberta. If we take a broad view of the situation in all provinces, we can see that in every province, French language universities are underfunded, including in Quebec. So I don't think the federal government is responsible for that, but the federal government, through its research investments, through agreements like the Canada-Quebec Agreement, are investing funds that do not support French language institutions. For example, the funding the funding that is invested to support linguistic vitality could be invested directly in French language institutions outside Quebec. For example, this $150 million that is supposed to support linguistic vitality could be invested outside Quebec. If you're looking for money, there's at least $50 million available somewhere. Great. Could you tell us more about the concept of a double majority? The UN Human Rights Commission does not recognize Anglophones in Quebec as being a minority because they are part of the English-speaking majority in Canada as a whole. And that means that the English, well, the whole linguistic legislation in Quebec is founded on the notion of a minority language. And Quebec was a constitution was imposed on Quebec in 1982. Quebec remains a minority within Canada. So perhaps you'd like to say more on that. In my book, I wrote that what should have been done is set up an asymmetric Official Languages Act, recognizing that the only real majority in Canada is English speaking. Even in Quebec, French speakers are a false majority. Francophones can't assimilate immigrants that settle in Quebec properly. Anglophones are assimilating half of the immigrants. I don't know any minority in the world that's actually managed to achieve that. The original Official Languages Act is a false concept that is in fact making it impossible to see what is actually happening on the ground, which is a decline in French everywhere, including in Quebec. French is declining very quickly in Quebec as well, and the role of the federal government in that decline is extremely significant. In my view, the federal government should abandon this concept of a double majority, a twofold majority, and review the act completely. So you're proposing a comprehensive study on institutional completeness for each of the language groups in Canada in every province. I'd like to know what Ms. Chouinard thinks about that proposal. And I do believe my time is up. In fact, Mr. Beaulieu, your time is indeed up. I could have given you some leeway, but we have received instructions from the House asking us to terminate on time. Perhaps you can come back to this in the next round, or this afternoon when we'll be hearing Mr. Angus will be with us. Mr. Angus, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Haché, for being here today. Your participation is extremely important for Francophone communities, Indigenous communities. These communities in Northern Ontario must understand the roots of the financial crisis in Ontario, in Northern Ontario.
To plunging the university into the bankruptcy protection, which my colleague, Mr. Lefebvre, has said cut out the heart of the soul of Laurentian. And you said there were a number of meetings between the provincial and federal governments in the lead up to that. So in your meetings with the federal government, did you ask for financial help or support to avoid having to go into bankruptcy?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, we did have a number of meetings over the last year and the time leading up on both the provincial and federal side. And in all cases, we were quite transparent in the magnitude of our financial difficulties and the origin of our financial difficulties, and did make requests or ask if there was any way, in case response to your specific question, that there were any possibilities that we could receive assistance from the federal government. And as was already described a little bit, there were a number of suggestions that were made in terms of programs that would be available to us, some of which we continue to try and take advantage of.
Well, thank you for that, because what surprised me is Mr. Lefebvre said publicly that when you met with him, there was, quote, there was no ask, no number. So you're saying you actually asked, you put a plan on the table, because he said that the extent of the crisis was not made clear to them till the end of December, but you were meeting with them before that. So did you lay out an ask? And if not, why not?
So at the end of December, we were very transparent in the magnitude of the challenges that we had, and without making a specific ask, in highlighting the magnitude of the challenge, the gap that we had Laurentian, and looking for any way in which the federal government might be able to help us to bridge that gap.
But what about December 6th meeting with Mr. Lefebvre, and I think Mr. Serre was there? Didn't you tell them that you were in crisis?
As I said, we were fairly transparent all through the lead up to the process, both provincially and federally, and explaining in meetings that we had the magnitude of the challenges that we had at the university.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so you were transparent. I appreciate that, of the magnitude, because this is an absolute crisis that happened. And what surprised me was that Madame Joly, the Minister of FEDNOR, who represents economic development as well as the official languages in the Franco-Ontarian community, said if she had been told, she would have intervened and worked with the province. Do you think it might have been better to have gone directly to Madame Joly than to the two local MPs? Because she said she would have acted.
Well, in hindsight, perhaps.
Mr. Chair, a technical point of order.
Oh, excusez-moi, point d'ordre, j'arrête le temps. Monsieur Arsenault.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop the time. Mr. Arsenault, I'm having a difficult time understanding. I don't know if Mr. Angus is speaking a bit quickly. I'm not sure if it's just me, if my computer is freezing, but I'm having a hard time hearing what he is saying. It's as if it was cutting out. Okay, thank you. I will ask the clerk to check on that. So, Mr. Angus, could you please say a sentence or two so that we can check the sound, please? Time has stopped.
Certainly willing to say a sentence or two, and I hope that none of this comes off my time. Is that correct? I can speak as slowly as you must.
That's correct. It's technical problem, so okay. Don't worry about that. So, Madame la Greffière.
So, Madame Clerk, is that fine? Yes, everything's very good in the room when it comes to sound. And what about you, Mr. Arsenault? Can you hear better now? And all other members? It's the same thing. It might just be me. Even when the clerk replied, the sound was very weak and it cut. It wasn't an even sound. Okay, does any other member have the same problem? Mr. Beaulieu, do you have the same problem?
Il me semble que c'était...
It didn't seem so bad to me. But sometimes I see that I have a bad connection.
Okay, ben, écoute.
Okay. Well, we will be vigilant and keep an eye on that, but we will continue with Mr. Angus now. And Mr. Angus, you have a bit less than 3 minutes left. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, I just want to... So you said that you were transparent about the magnitude of the crisis. Madame Joly said she would have helped if she had been told. So I'd asked you, given what you know now, would it not maybe have been better to go above the local MPs, talk directly to the Minister of FEDNOR, because she said she had the capacity to work with the province to help find a solution to this crisis at Laurentian?
So we did reach out broadly in answer to your question, both federally and provincially. We did absolutely work with our local MPs as an important touch point. We have a strong relationship and an ongoing relationship with them, but also reached out directly. In some meetings we were successful in achieving, and others we were not.
She said she would have intervened and helped if she had been made known. And this is, for me, we're looking at something that's been disastrous for our region, and we have a minister who said, if I had been told, I would have been there. Mr. Lefebvre said publicly that in the end, Laurentian has done this to itself with the blessing of the provincial government, and yet we have the Minister of FEDNOR who said, I would have helped if I had known. So given the magnitude of the crisis, why didn't you reach out to her and say, we need your help now?
So as I said, we did reach out federally as well as provincially through our MPs and otherwise, and certain meetings we achieved and others we did not. And hindsight can be 20/20, and if we had been more aggressive, more successful, perhaps there might have been a change, but perhaps not as well.
Well, I totally understand. I mean, we're talking about a catastrophe that has occurred here. I had heard my colleague had said that, there's stuff with some maybe official languages. Maybe we could look at these programs. But we were looking at an unprecedented crisis where a university was plunged into bankruptcy protection. Mr. Lefebvre also told people in Sudbury that there was, quote, no big check coming. Madame Joly's put money on the table now. Would it have been better to have had the money on the table before rather than what we're dealing with in this situation now?
So I think, given the current discussions, I think the efforts that the federal government are making and may be willing to make, I think will be extremely helpful going forward.
I absolutely agree. I think Madame Joly really cares. I'm just surprised what she said she would have helped, that she was not told. You had met with the local MPs. You said you were transparent about it, that you explained the magnitude of the crisis to them, that was not passed on to the minister, who is the Minister of FedNor for our entire region. I just think that this was a really tragic and lost opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Thank you. That is all the time that we have. Now, 2 members for the time that we have left with our witnesses, because we have other witnesses that will be joining us. So the next round, I have Mr. Godin and Mr. Serré. You will each have 4 minutes, followed by Mr. Beaulieu and Mr. Boulris, so 2.5 minutes each. So, Mr. Godin, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes. Please go ahead. For the next 4 minutes? Yes, the next 4 minutes. So to save time, I want to thank all of the witnesses. My first question goes to Mr. Haché. I would like to go back over a timeline of the facts. What I understand from my colleagues in your region were represented well last December. And it was shared that Laurentian was heading for major cuts. I was part of the group in February put in place to intervene. Unfortunately, programs were cut, including many Francophone programs. Just before her testimony on Tuesday, the minister publicly announced $5 million to help Laurentian University. But ever in the background was the idea that it is not the federal government's responsibility to aid post-secondary institutions. Mr. Haché, I must say that I find it deplorable for there to be a partisan spin on this, because in Part 2 of Section B, if we look at the law, it says it must protect minorities, Francophone and Anglophone, and in Canadian society, foster the equal status of French and English. So we can clearly observe that there was a problem between December, when there was a meeting with the current government representatives, and when we met with the minister, because the minister told us that she did not know, and if she had been aware, she would have intervened. So if I were to hear that Laurentian University was headed where it was headed, and if I had the mandate to protect minority official language communities, I would not hide behind provincial versus federal jurisdictions. It is the minister's responsibility. Mr. Haché, what is your interpretation of the way that the Minister of Official Languages has acted in the case of Laurentian University? Well, thank you very much for the question. All that I can reiterate is that we had numerous conversations with the federal government and with the provincial government. And the responsibility for post-secondary university education was brought up with both groups. We had many conversations, and we anticipate continuing on to work with the federal and provincial governments to reach a fertile and sustainable future for Laurentian. Thank you, Mr. Haché. What I'm understanding is that you do not want to comment on the fact that the minister did not show leadership and was not very proactive. My second question is for Ms. Chouinard. I hope that you will have time to answer this time. Ms. Chouinard, you said that in 1981, university graduates age 15 and over were at 37%, and now that proportion is 65%. So having students enroll in university and post-secondary programs has almost doubled. Now, why is it that Laurentian University was not able to take advantage of that great opportunity to increase its enrollments, which in turn would have supported its sustainability? I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question, but what Mr. Haché said was that Francophone clients at Laurentian University were increasing. That's, I'm not an expert, and I know that Laurentian, oh, excuse me, Ms. Chouinard. I was mistaken. I thought that you were with Mr. Haché, so that was my mistake. Oh, red card. I'm sorry, Ms. Chouinard. You've been getting cut off in the committee today. Thank you, Mr. Godin. We're going to continue. Mr. Serré is next for the next 4 minutes. Please go ahead. Your microphone, Mr. Serré. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have to confess that I was really deeply disturbed when I heard the news about Laurentian University's cut. Myself and my colleague Paul Lefebvre were aware of budgetary concerns. However, we really didn't, it was far beyond what we imagined, certainly not going through the CCA process. It was a tough, and it hit the heart of Greater Sudbury. So like many of you, we reacted emotionally. Laurentian is such an important post-secondary institution, much more than just bricks and mortars. Laurentian is a community of people who contribute to the economic development, cultural, and of course, economic educational wealth. So it's really a heart sense loss and tragedy for the faculty and the students who are pursuing their passion. Monsieur Haché, vous avez mentionné...
Mr. Haché, earlier you mentioned that there's no post-secondary department in Ottawa, so all proposals need to go through Queen's Park. Based on your experience, can you confirm that? So the federal government didn't necessarily give you funding directly. It had to go through the province. Is that correct? Yes, I believe that is correct. Thank you. I also have another question. But first, Mr. Angus has already left. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Haché. Mr. Angus was an MP.
Years, the lobbying register shows that he has never met with Laurentian University or yourself. Can you confirm that Mr. Angus has met with you, your predecessor, for any support or any proactive support for the Laurentian University, yes or no?
All I can say is that I have not had the pleasure of meeting directly with Mr. Angus in the time that I've been at Laurentian. I can't comment on my predecessors, unfortunately.
So they did not have a meeting. Let that show on the record. So there was an uncertainty for the Francophone minority that flows from this case of Laurentian University. Can you talk about French language programming and why was Laurentian called a bilingual university and why were literature and culture programs cut? Well, thank you very much for the question because it is a very important question.
The programs we cut were all programs with very few students, and they had few students for a long time, 2 or 3 students per program over the year. So even with additional funding, that level is extremely difficult to support. And in fact, it's not the best environment for students to have only 2 or 3 in a class. So it is not Laurentian that chose which programs would become extinct. It was the students by showing a lack of interest year after year. So we have kept the programs in which the students are interested. And this will also give us an opportunity to rebuild new programs in the future, which will be in greater demand. And the last thing that I would like to say is that we need to make a distinction between programs and courses. Language courses, theater, arts, drama. There will be a good selection of courses. It is 4-year programs as such, as a whole, that will no longer be offered. We continue to offer comprehensive education in English and French. There have been cuts on both sides, in both languages. In fact, no distinction was made. We made similar decisions for English programs too. Thank you. Mr. Beaulieu, 2 minutes. I'll let Ms. Chouinard answer my question. Does she find it relevant that there would be studies on institutional completeness across Canada and particularly in Quebec? Does she think that would be a good thing? Yes. This is not just a theoretical tool. It has been tried and tested, and it provides us with data that shows where the gaps are and what we can do to best fill them in order to meet current needs of the community, notwithstanding constitutional provisions. So a study that would compare the percentage of funding for Francophone universities outside Quebec compared to the percentage of Francophones. There would be difficulties in doing that kind of study because federal funding, for example, when it's transferred to the provinces, we know full well what comes in, but we don't know what it's really used to fund and how much of that funding really goes to minority language institutions. And that applies to both post-secondary programs and further studies too. Mr. Lacroix, on the overfunding of English language post-secondary institutions in Montreal, what is the impact on Montreal's language dynamics? English language universities in Montreal account for really over half of the space. They take up over half of the institutional space in Montreal. Federal funding is one of the reasons that explains the increase in ranking of McGill and Concordia. They have been hiring a lot. They are extremely successful with their funding applications. And when you've had funding in the past, that is often a guarantee of funding for the future. Thank you, Mr. Lacroix. The last speaker will be Mr. Boulris. You have 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good afternoon to all our witnesses. My question is to Ms. Chouinard. In your view, is federal investment in post-secondary education sufficient to achieve genuine equality for Francophones in minority language communities? When it comes to federal investment, I think it could certainly be enhanced, but the point is to not only to ensure that it's enhanced, but that it's not enhanced at the expense of provinces. We need to ensure that any additional funding provided by the federal government will not lead to cutbacks in Edmonton, in Toronto and Fredericton, for example. That is what we have to focus on if we really want the federal government to invest funding. We need structural long-term funding, not just patchwork fixes like we've seen in recent years. We also have to ensure that the provinces keep up their end properly. No, we certainly don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, because that isn't going to get us any further. Do we also need more accountability and transparency mechanisms? I was going to broach that subject quickly. Yes, there is official languages funding that somehow seems to vanish. It's not basic funding, it's additional funding, and it gets lost somewhere in the provincial budgets. That is a serious problem. If we had more accountability of where official languages funding went in education, we could make sure that all funds transferred from Ottawa are actually spent where they were intended to be spent. Mr. Boulris, thank you. That is all the time we have. And the time has now come for us to thank our witnesses for taking part in this study on federal support for French language or bilingual post-secondary institutions in a minority situation. Ms. Stéphanie Chouinard, your Assistant Professor at the Department of Political Science, Royal Military College of Canada, and Department of Political Studies at Queen's University. Thank you. Mr. Frédéric Lacroix, essayist, thank you. Mr. Robert Haché, President and Vice Chancellor of Laurentian University, and Marie-Josée Berger, Provost and Vice President of Academics at Laurentian. Thank you all. Dear colleagues, we will take one brief minute, just time enough to greet our next panel to say goodbye to our witnesses and greet the next. Good afternoon. We will resume our session. For the benefit of witnesses who have just joined us, I'm going to repeat some instructions. First of all, it is prohibited to take screenshots. You may not take screenshots or photographs of any kind. We have simultaneous interpretation, so you can speak in the official language of your choice. And please do address your questions to the chair. For the second part of this meeting, we welcome Denis Constantino from the Northern Ontario Coalition for French Language University, and Mr. Pierre Riopel, Chairman of the Council of Regents from the University of Sudbury. You have 5 minutes. I will let you know when your time is up, after which we will hear Mr. Riopel. Mr. Constantino will begin. Please do turn on your microphone. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Northern Ontario Coalition for French Language University, I would like to point out the disastrous circumstances of university education, French language university education in Sudbury. I would like to explain the impact of these orders and of the solution. The coalition brings together institutions, individuals, and organizations that are active in a variety of sectors. It flowed from the Planif Sudbury table. As we heard in February, Laurentian University called upon the bankruptcy and receivership legislation to go into receivership. This was a shock to our community. Laurentian University announced on April 12th that it would be abolishing 28 of the 69 programs, 40%. It has lost, as an institution, the confidence of the community. This eliminated the many dynamic programs that played a role in creating a contemporary Franco-Ontarian identity. Gaetan Gervais, history professors at Laurentian, student Michel Dupuis, and seamstress Jacqueline England created the Franco-Ontarian flag, which flowed over the University of Sudbury in 1975 for the first time. French language programs, cultural programs have disappeared, programs that shaped generations of young adults, who then had careers in the arts and education. These were the precursors of programs and elements that have forged the vitality of our communities.
Monsieur Constantino, ici la greffière du...
Mr. Constantino, can you hear me? I believe that we lost your sound for a few moments. No, please do go on. Please do go on. In cutting those programs, Laurentian University is depriving the community by its leaders. It is removing sources of essential knowledge from the community. It is also obliging many young francophones and francophiles to study elsewhere in Ontario with all the costs that engenders. It is amplifying the regional exodus of young people to cities, something that is already too big a problem in many of our communities. These events show the limitations of bilingual institutions, since federal transfers for official language minorities never come with an accountability framework. It's not surprising that French money is often paying for snow removal in some cities. Promoting French language programs is not always a priority for bilingual institutions, and we saw that Laurentian flagged in that for years, in spite of many people's efforts. This is why Francophones in our regions have for 50 years been calling for a fully French language university. As a result of these events, the University of Sudbury announced that it wanted to be a university for, by, and with Francophones. It has made both its charters available to the Francophone and Indigenous communities so that they can create their own establishments. Our coalition is working to achieve that and has formulated recommendations. First, that all French language programming from Laurentian U, including those that were cut, be fully and comprehensively and immediately transferred to University of Sudbury. That federal transfer payments which were made to Laurentian U immediately be transferred to the University of Sudbury. That the Ontario government intervene and ensure that 2021-22 programming at Laurentian U go forward, suspend the cuts announced, find the funding necessary to appease creditors and facilitate the transfer of programs that we have indicated. The Provincial Implementation Committee, in the Provincial Implementation Committee, should be struck and given the task of providing a structure for delivering French language university education in the North. The Commission could provide a transition plan. Lastly, we would like recognition of the significance of Indigenous study programs that the University of Sudbury has offered for the past 40 years. Let's be clear, we don't want Laurentian U to disappear. Our community needs an institution of that kind, but what we want is a university that is entirely for, by, and with Francophones that will support it with pride.
Also, a reminder to witnesses, you may submit a brief or further information to our clerk. That way, we will consider that information as part of our study. Now, Mr. Riopel has the floor for 5 minutes. Please go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair Dubourg, and thank you to committee members for inviting me. Your interest in post-secondary education in French in mid-North Ontario is encouraging. I would like for you to know that I had the opportunity to speak with Denis Constantino before this hearing, and I agree with what he has told you today. My name is Pierre Riopel. I am Franco-Ontarian. I am chair of the Council of Regents of the University of Sudbury. For over 30 years, and I see one of my former colleagues here, my career has been in education as a school and college administrator. Since I am an educator at heart, I would ask you to allow me, as the history teacher that I was, to tell you a little history about the University of Sudbury, an institution that is close to my heart. In this history, there are 4 important dates. First, 1913. The Jesuits founded this Sacred Heart College in Sudbury, a French-language classical college. It was created in the context of Regulation 17, a law which prohibited French-language education in Ontario. 1957, Sacred Heart College became the University of Sudbury. Everything was done in French, administration and teaching. Third date, 1960, Laurentian University, a bilingual institution, opened its doors. At that time, the Laurentian Federation was formed, including University of Sudbury. That model worked well for almost 60 years, but we all recently witnessed Laurentian's recent disengagement from the Francophonie, but never more so than in the present case unfolding before the Ontario Superior Court under the CCAA. And finally, 2021, under the protection of its creditors, Laurentian has cavalierly and abruptly terminated the Federation and made massive cuts to its programming in an effort to eliminate a multitude of services and jobs. Rector Haché made some revealing admissions during his April 23rd cross-examination. Out of nearly 1,500 pages in 4 volumes of Laurentian University's request under the CCAA, there is no mention of the French Language Services Act. No concern is expressed by Rector Haché about Laurentian's inability to continue to provide existing services in French. Nothing. Yet, Laurentian has been designated under this law since 2014, rigorously requiring it to maintain specific faculties and programs in French. Know also that by ending the federational link between Laurentian and Sudbury universities, the latter has lost its means to fulfill the obligations under its own designation under the French Language Services Act. None of this was mentioned in Rector Haché's legal text before the court. Overnight, University of Sudbury lost all rights to teach the Laurentian Federation students. Before Laurentian filed its request under the CCAA on February 1st, there was no consultation whatsoever with the Francophone community. Similarly, there was no consultation whatsoever before Laurentian announced significant cuts to its French language programs. The cuts are the result of financial calculations without consideration for the impact of these decisions on students, faculty, staff, and the community at large. In light of these events, the University of Sudbury is now devoting all its efforts to a new future. We have retained legal counsel, including constitutional lawyer Ronald Kaza, passed 2 resolutions on March 11th, one which was to transform the University of Sudbury into the Sudbury French Language University. We struck 2 ad hoc committees, Francophone and Indigenous, created a Francophone working group to develop a business plan, and received abundant community support, including, as my colleague Mr. Constantino said, from their coalition. Also, we received a petition signed by more than 400 Francophone professors from across the country and abroad. There also was a campaign, and we received Rector Haché, and that included 3,000 letters of support from across Canada. The time has come to carry out this project of a French language university because it has been coveted, imagined, and wished for by several generations of Franco-Ontarians. It is time to create our French language university in Sudbury by, for, and with Franco-Ontarians. This is an historic event. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Riopel. You both truly respected the time allocation. Without further ado, for 6 minutes, Mr. Blaney has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yes, not only did our two witnesses respect their time limit, they also gave us hope this afternoon, telling us about how every time a door closes, a window opens, and I can see that they are in solution mode. Mr. Haché seemed to think that all went well. Inaudible for the interpreter.
Excusez-moi, monsieur.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Est-ce possible?
Would it be possible?
OK, alors on dirait que le son...
Okay. It seems that the sound on Zoom is working, but that the sound in the room, including the sound for interpreters, is not working. Mr. Chair, could I have a moment to suspend? Did he say that we would suspend?
Ben, les interprètes, ils disaient inaudible, on n'entend pas.
The interpreters were saying inaudible. The interpreters can't hear.
Moi, j'ai rien.
Bonjour, on a perdu le son ici dans la salle, donc les PPO, mais aussi les interprètes entendent absolument rien. Mais je pense que vous êtes, ça continuait. Oui? Oui, ben le problème, c'est qu'au point de vue de la transcription, au point de vue de possiblement ce qui sort sur Parview, et surtout au point de vue des interprètes, les interprètes ne peuvent pas entendre parce qu'eux sont connectés sur la salle. Donc, donnez-moi une petite seconde. Moi je n'entends rien de tout ce qui se dit. Je vois M. Serré qui rit. Mais moi, j'entends rien.
Ready to resume. There. We have resumed. We were listening to Mr. Blaney putting a question. Mr. Blaney, 4.5 minutes. Please go ahead. My question was to Mr. Riopel and Mr. Constantino. Laurentian University seems to be saying, well, they're taking it for granted that they're going to be resuming in September. When do you think your Francophone university will be able to take up the programs? We know that the minister has provided funding, and I'd like to complete my question by saying that the committee is there to support you.
À qui adressez-vous la question?
To whom is that question? Mr. Riopel first. Thank you. Historically, Franco-Ontarians have always been there. What we're asking is programs to be immediately repatriated from Laurentian University to Sudbury. Time flies. This is a very ambitious effort, but we've done it with schools, we've done it with colleges. There are solutions. So if there could be support for this through the province, well, we would certainly be glad of it. We're very happy to hear Ms. Jolie's announcement of 50 million because there will be issues of management and governance to deal with. You're talking about September 2021. That's when you would like to launch the new programs. So basically remove everything that's Francophone from Laurentian University and bringing it to Sudbury. Yes, that is what we'd like. Mr. Constantino? Yes, of course, Mr. Constantino. Thank you. I think some points are important. You talked about the fact that Laurentian University was still talking on behalf of the community, but I want to be clear, it no longer brings us together as an institution. It no longer represents us. The community has lost all confidence in its bilingual approach, and it cannot speak for us. Do you have support from your local MPs? I know that Mr. Lefebvre is there. Who are your members? Whose riding is Laurentian U in? And have you spoken to them about your plans? Are they engaged in helping you find a solution? The coalition has spoken frequently with Mr. Lefebvre and Mr. Serré on this. We have excellent lines of communication. The support is there. Of course, we recognize the distinction that needs to be made between provincial and federal level jurisdiction, but they have answered the call and are ready to support us. That's good to know because it's important. We will formulate recommendations accordingly. I believe I still have a few seconds. Mr. Riopel? I completely agree with Mr. Constantino. Mr. Lefebvre and Mr. Serré have certainly expressed their support, as have our members of the Ontario Legislative Assembly, the Ontario MLAs. We are also in regular contact with Senator Moncion and others. So we have excellent support. Thank you. That is reassuring. It's reassuring to see that other elected officials and my colleagues are engaged. What we want to do is ensure that there is continuity in the programs and in education offerings for Francophones in the north of Ontario. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blaney. And Mr. Blaney, have you raised your hand? Is it a... Is it a point of order? Mr. Lefebvre. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. It was important for Parliament to hear what was happening in the community. This is the cradle of Franco-Ontarian identity, Laurentian, and this is why it's so wrenching to see what's happened. These cuts have really cut the heart and soul out of Laurentian, which is extremely concerning. So what needs to be done to make sure that students have a place where they can come together? The community has an institution that represents them. Your coalition has a very interesting project, and this is something that needs to be looked at very closely. Mr. Riopel, about transferring programs from Laurentian to Sudbury, you say that you have the support of people you've spoken to. What has the province said? Well, we have spoken to the Ministry of Francophone Affairs, to the Minister of Colleges and Universities for some time now. I can confirm that we wrote an official letter to Mr. Romano today, clearly indicating our intention to repatriate these programs. So everybody in the provincial government, I would say, is well aware. In your proposal, there are local possibilities. Can you go over the plan for the University of Sudbury? You would also like a network involving Toronto and other universities. Could you please give us an update on the talks you're having with other institutions? Yes, we have had conversations with Bathurst University, with Hearst University, rather. They're quite far away from us. We've also spoken to the University of French Ontario, which is in Toronto. That is how things are. In post-secondary institutions, we have a network, we have agreements so that our students can use courses, can follow courses, take courses, I should be saying, in other institutions, even online. That network is great, and our intentions are clear. It's also good to see what we can do locally. And that is the debate which is ongoing. Denis, Mr. Constantino, could you tell us your views on the community? How does the community see this transfer of programs from Laurentian to Sudbury? What's your view of the future that represents? We want success in the end. I'm sure that transferring the programs will lead to that, but it's important to have the community supporting the change. Yes, it's clear that there is community support for this province-wide. Nobody's been saying, no, it's not a good idea. So the support is there. And that's important. I'd like to come back to what Mr. Haché was saying, who said that other students were being affected as well. But that's not true. There are students who weren't affected directly by the cuts, but are leaving because they don't have access to the courses they want. There are other people, like a professor who's leaving and whose program was left intact. But there is tremendous community support, unequivocal community support for a French language university. Students will have to transfer because otherwise they will be having to take some of their courses in English, which was a matter of concern to them. Well, thank you both for being here today. We'll continue our conversations. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. And we can now give the floor to the second vice chair of the committee, Mr. Beaulieu. Please go ahead. Thank you. Thank you to both our witnesses who made very interesting presentations. I have a question. There was an article on Radio-Canada regarding a secret meeting of bilingual universities to eliminate or put an end to the project aiming at creating the French University of Ontario. There are not many universities by and for Francophones, so I'd like to hear your view. Mr. Constantino can begin, if you would. I think we're coming back to our initial point. Bilingual institutions are not meeting the needs of Francophone students. It's 2021. Bilingual institutions no longer meet the needs. We've seen it with schools and colleges, and it is now for universities to provide the completeness, the institutional completeness that's required. People are demanding, requiring, insisting on a French language university managed by the community. Thank you. I don't know whether Mr. Riopel would like to add something to that, but in primary and secondary schools, the by and for Francophone aspect is tremendously important. Should Franco-Ontarians not mobilize in greater numbers? We saw how they mobilized for the French Language University of Ontario. Should they not now mobilize for this to make sure that there are universities run by and for Francophones? At present, a request has been submitted to the provincial government, and what the next steps will be dictated by how they respond. I saw the same article as you, Mr. Beaulieu, that mobilization, what we called in 2018 the resistance, well, that's really part of Franco-Ontarians' DNA. In all situations like colleges, secondary schools, primary schools, Francophone establishments, we have always ended up winning. So I am extremely confident. On Tuesday, there was an announcement when the minister appeared before the Official Languages committee. She was talking about some 5 million that could be used by the University of Sudbury. I think it would be very well invested there. I was delighted when I saw that portion of a sentence saying it could. Well, it was a bit too conditional. I worried a bit about the verb, but I'd like will rather than could. Will be or could be at present to develop institutions by and for Ontarians, and that's exactly what we want to do. At Sudbury, we have a structure that functions in French, that is built up in French, and that is for French speakers. There, it is not bilingual. There are two very erudite people who have talked about this, Pierre Bélanger and Jean Grenier, who are both alumni of Laurentian and who've both said that it's time to turn the page. Bilingual institutions have outlived their usefulness. The researcher who appeared before you, one of them at least, was saying that in Ontario, Francophones make up 4.7% of the population, but have only some 3% of the provincial post-secondary budget. In Quebec, Anglophones account for about 8% of the population, but get 30% of the post-secondary education budget. So what does that mean to you, the fact that there's so little funding from the provincial government for post-secondary institutions operating in French?
That means that there's a lot of catch-up to do. So we've proved it at other schooling levels. Now it's time for us to have a chance to prove it at the university level. Thank you to Mr. Beaulieu and to our witnesses. The floor now goes to Mr. Boulris. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Constantino and Mr. Riopel. Thank you very much for being with us today. First, let me say that I am wholeheartedly with your initiative and your project for university for and by Francophones in the mid-north and the north of Ontario. As Mr. Blaney said earlier, if we can make a constructive and positive contribution on this committee, I would certainly like to participate in that. I'd like you to talk about the matching mechanism. And I use the English word, but it's hard to find another word for matching. But it's an equivalent funding mechanism, talking about, of course, provincial and federal funding. Do you find that this gives a sort of veto on different initiatives when the federal government is not necessarily for that initiative? What is your take on that? Go ahead, Mr. Riopel, or one of you may take the question. I am not a legal expert, so that question is a bit more tricky for me. But if you are asking me the question, does it hold us back from funding? I do think it is an added pitfall that we have to face, especially in post-secondary. I don't know how day-to-day budget management works in the government, but I did hear from the the prior organization that mentioned the lack of an accountability mechanism, and I do agree with that. When Anglophones were the majority on school boards, we received French money, as it was called. And that French money would mysteriously disappear, and we didn't know where it went. So we do know about that. That is a fact. So yes, that complicates things for us. Mr. Costantino? Well, when it's not possible to follow where the money goes, that does complicate the situation. And earlier we were talking about how programs are affected because there aren't enough students, but those programs were not invested in. The professors were not supported, students were not recruited, and all of a sudden the university turns around and says, it's time to cut the program. But we don't know if those programs had been properly invested in. And if they had been, they may still be in place today. So that's not really the right way to manage a university. Go ahead, Mr. Riopel. Yes, if I may, I would like to add something. So bilingual institutions receive funding to offset that sort of challenge. That is the exact reason. So we have small schools in Ontario, but we do receive funding to compensate for the fact that a high school only has 48 students, for example. And when it comes to governments, what, in your opinion, would be the best mechanism to make sure that the federal government funding to Francophone minority education is used for Francophone minority education and not for other things? Because funds are transferred thinking that those funds are going to help Francophones, and then, as it was said earlier, it turns out that that money is used to clear the sidewalks. Mr. Riopel, perhaps? Yes. Well, I think it becomes a question of accountability. It's a question of explaining exactly where that money went. So having an accountability system, I believe, would certainly help. One last question. Despite the underfunding in Laurentian University's French language programs over the past years, are you confident that you will be able to provide those programs and those services at what would be the new Francophone Sudbury University? I believe I referred to that. So there's an implementation commission. That would be one of the mandates of the implementation commission, to figure out which programs really are profitable if they were properly invested in, and which new programs are needed to ensure that the community develops around that university. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Boulris, and thank you to the witnesses. In order to respect our time limits, Mr. Dalton will have 3 minutes, followed by Mr. Serre. And then Mr. Beaulieu and Mr. Boulris will each have 1.5 minutes so that we may finish this meeting on time. So, Mr. Dalton, you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead. Thank you very much for your testimonies, Mr. Constantino and Mr. Riopel. My mother is originally from Northern Ontario. She's Franco-Ontarian. She's from not far from Kapuskasing, so I am very interested in your particular situation. But it is a situation that we are observing across Canada as well. The situation is rather confusing because Mr. Haché said that the number of Francophone students is stable, or even that Francophone students have increased. Yet, we see these major cuts. Could you perhaps shed some light on that? And what about the university, the Anglophone university programs? Did they also see such major cuts, or was it mostly on the Francophone side? Perhaps Mr. Riopel? Yes. Well, it would be difficult for me to comment on the numbers that Mr. Haché presented because I do not necessarily have access to that information. But I can answer your second question. So when it comes to your second question, based on what I've read and based on what I know, the Francophone community and Francophone programs were disproportionately affected as compared to the Anglophone majority at Laurentian University, and that is very, very concerning for us. We heard from a witness during the first hour of our meeting, and the witness said that the number of post-secondary students has increased from 37% of students in 1982 who went to post-secondary institutions to 65% today. So that is a major increase. So we need more investment into programs, including from the federal government. So my question is, in your opinion, was federal funding sufficient to assist post-secondary or bilingual or Francophone or bilingual post-secondary institutions like yours? Well, I would be inclined to say that the short answer is no. Because often there are additional costs entailed, and this has been my experience. So I think that the fact that we are a linguistic minority must be taken into account. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Now, Mr. Serre has 3 minutes. Please go ahead. Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much, Pierre and Denis, for your decades of work for the Francophone community in the North and all around Canada. So thank you for your testimony. I just have 3 minutes. And I have a few questions. First, the letter that you sent to Minister Romano, did it include the next steps? Did you ask for those $5 million that the federal minister Joly already announced for Ontario? So I signed the letter as representative of the Council of Regents, and our main objective was to support all Laurentian Francophone services and programs. So we asked for funding, but we did not go so far as to ask for $5 million in particular. Great. You were talking about local support. Could you elaborate? For example, the Ontario Francophonie Assembly and Carole Jolin. Could you talk more about the support that you received, not only from Northern Ontario, but from elsewhere as well? Yes, I can respond. Mr. Riopel mentioned this. There was a letter signed by 3,000 university professors. I also have a list next to me of organizations that adopted resolutions to support us. There were also about 100 provincial organizations, and this was across sectors. We're not just talking about education and post-secondary sectors, but also healthcare, because healthcare is impacted. People who work in senior services and early childhood education as well. So there was very broad support from the community for this case. I often hear from my constituents about the University of Toronto in French. There's Sudbury University, the University of Hearst. I know that you have only been working on this case for a few months, but could you please explain how a network can be built to consult with people from the community who are concerned about there being too many universities in the network? Mr. Serre, I think that this is a matter of geography. I think that's what is essential. So first of all, we're talking about autonomy. We want to have a university that is independent and that collaborates to the best of its ability. Thank you very much, Mr. Serre, and to our witnesses. So we have 1.5 minutes each for Mr. Beaulieu and Mr. Boulris. Go ahead, Mr. Beaulieu. Your microphone, please. Oh, I just activated it. Thank you. So it seems there's a contradiction. We've heard from different school boards saying that there is not enough space in Francophone schools. We hear that there are very few students in certain programs. We're hearing about a difficulty to recruit students. What do you think of all of that? Well, after the cuts were announced, my son sent me a message and said if that happened today, I would not be able to study at Laurentian because he studied education, 2 specific programs that were cut. So we can't attract programs to a university if the university doesn't offer programs that those young people are interested in studying. And sometimes a Francophone wants to take a program in French, but there are not enough courses, so the student needs to take certain courses in English. That means that not enough courses are offered. Okay, perhaps Mr. Riopel would like to add something. Mr. Riopel, is this a reality for you when it comes to difficulty recruiting and a decrease in enrollment in Francophone programs? Well, if things are well done, it is possible to recruit. So Laurentian has been recruiting Anglophone students worldwide for many years, but only Francophone students for about 2 or 3 years. So energy and money needs to be invested. Thank you very much, Mr. Riopel. And the last minute and a half go to Mr. Boulris. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like for us to come back to the impact of having French language programs and training. You said there was an historic impact on Northern Ontario for many sectors, literature, midwifery, etc., and that also has an impact on the vitality and future of Francophone communities. What do you think the impact would be of not having a French language university in the north of Ontario for your communities? Well, practically speaking, I work with a health center that works directly on files such as poverty, immigration, homelessness, etc. And we're losing access. We would lose access to that knowledge, those researchers, and all those contributions that we are directly benefiting from those in our community. Yes, university is essential to how a community thrives. What we are proposing as a project is not a bilingual project, but it is the vitality of our Franco-Ontarian community, and in large part, that must go through university. Francophonie in Northern Ontario is vibrant. Why? Because we have had university programs. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, that is all the time that we have for this sitting. I would like to say thank you to our witnesses for agreeing to appear, and thank you for your contribution. I would also like to thank our analyst and our clerk for bringing us together this afternoon. And on that note, I would like to thank Mr. Denis Constantino from the Northern Ontario Coalition for a French language university, and Mr. Pierre Riopel, Chairman of the Council of Regents at the University of Sudbury. Thank you both very much. I would also like to thank the technicians and the whole team who have helped us this afternoon. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Merci, Pierre.